Good afternoon, everyone. Dear friends, I'm very happy to be here to introduce to you the topic of data and information required for an informed groundwater management. Next slide, please. The objective of this presentation is actually to introduce to you the contents of a background document that we prepared especially for the session, the document you can see here. And we will cover mainly three aspects. First, the main sources of groundwater data and information, then additional data and information needs, and at the end we will cover some of the challenges. These three topics are going to be talked in more depth by our panelists after this presentation. Next. We have societal and environmental problems that may or may not include groundwater. And if we want to reach solutions to these problems, we need to look at the different factors that are involved in these problems. Some of them won't involve groundwater and they are out of the scope of this session. But then we have the ones that involve groundwater. And the only way to tackle them is through an informed groundwater management. Informed, that's the key word, because it needs to be based on solid data and information. The main sources of data and information for groundwater come from three sources: monitoring, assessments, and another additional sources. But this is embedded in a framework of many challenges. And this is what we are going to cover in this session. So the contents of the rectangle in the slide. Next. So first, groundwater monitoring. What is this? It's defined as a systematic measurement and recording of the state of an aquifer. From this definition, we can immediately think of three things, the first 3 points: the purpose, the parameters, and the frequency. So when we monitor an aquifer, we want to know something. We want to know the state, so we want to know how much water there is, and is the quality of the groundwater good for my needs. And we want to know the trends. Is the aquifer depleting or is the quality deteriorating? From here, you hear there are two components. So we can look at an aquifer from the quantity perspective, the amount of water, and from the quality. And to monitor these two things, we will look at different parameters. It can be groundwater levels or can be nitrates, depending on what we are looking to. And also I mentioned the systematic measurement. So this means that the monitoring needs to be done with a certain frequency. So you cannot take a measurement now and then 4 years another one. You have to do it constantly to have an overview of what's going on in the aquifer. The water monitoring has been done traditionally in situ, either manually or with equipment that do it automatically. But now there are other approaches such as remote sensing and citizen science that are also worth considering because they are a great support for these traditional ways of monitoring. But all of this needs to be done in a way that the quality is assured, the quality of the data. Because if we cannot trust the quality of the data, then any result don't really make sense. Next. The second activity that is very important to get data and information for groundwater comes from groundwater assessments, which use monitoring outcomes together with all other relevant information to evaluate the situation of groundwater. It's like taking a picture and seeing what's going on in the moment. We have two different sources for data for assessment. So one is groundwater data, such as hydrogeological characterization, the delineation of an aquifer, and also special data, for example, zones of surface water and groundwater interaction. But also, this is very important, we need non-groundwater data because groundwater exists in a context. So we cannot only look at the aquifer, but also need to look at the context. And this will be data about climate, environmental aspects, legal aspects, socioeconomic aspects, etc. We have also additional data and information needs. And what do I mean? There is data and information that will come, that is related to the specific management measure that we want to apply. That can be one of these types. So for example, if we want to apply a groundwater metering, which is the measurement of the consumption of groundwater to regulate the demand, this sounds like a great measure, but if we don't know the context, for example, we don't know if this measure is going to be accepted by the public or how we are going to deal with vandalism or how we are going to enforce it, then we cannot really apply the measure. So we need to collect data on this particular type of measure. Next slide, please. Then we have the challenges that I mentioned before. We have something related to the mandates to collect groundwater. So in countries, we have many institutions collecting different types of groundwater that generates a problem when you don't know who is doing what. We have lack of resources, both human and financial, so there is not enough resources to hire a groundwater specialist or to buy equipment, to maintain a database. We have a general lack of sharing of data and information that can be because of many reasons, because the institutions don't want to do it, or because there is too much confusion of where is the data, so they cannot do it. There is also poor data management without proper quality assurance and control. So data is collected, but you cannot use it because the metadata is not there. So for example, if you don't have the coordinates of where you took a measurement, then you cannot use really this data that you collected. And then at the end, you have the data collected is not transformed in useful information. And this is, for me, the saddest thing, because then you have a nice monitoring program, you have professionals who invest money, you have equipment, etc., and then the data at the end ends up in a database, and nobody does anything with it, and it's a waste. Next. So the messages that we wanted to convey are this one. So first, we have the knowledge to understand groundwater. We know how to do geology, we know how to do monitoring and assessment, so it's now a matter of doing it. Groundwater data and information comes mainly from two sources, assessments and monitoring. No assessment can be complete if we don't have a record of historical data, because this will allow us to make projections for the future. Data needs to be findable, accessible, reusable to support the transformation of data into useful information. Also, we need specific data and information that will be related to the management measures that we want to apply that goes beyond a traditional groundwater assessment. There are multiple challenges that we need to address, and the cost of not addressing these challenges is very high. And at the end, well, we need to raise awareness, increase citizen participation, and lobby for appropriate monitoring and assessment, which is we are doing today, actually. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Claudia. This was very helpful, and particularly also the